My name's Kim Waldschmidt. I live on Spear Road, and I'm just going to be kind of the MC tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about aquatic plants. So first up is our resident biologist and scientist and board member, Barry Nagel, and he's going to introduce us to some of the benefits of aquatic plants in our lake. So Barry, take her away.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. It's a pleasure having you here. Over the past year, we've gotten a lot of questions about plants, aquatic plants, and some people have been noticing that there's a lot more plants in the lake, and they're seeing new species of plants. So we thought that it would be a good idea to put on a small presentation on the plants in our lake. And our keynote speaker is Tyler DeLauder, and Tyler is with the DNR, and he is the guy who knows a tremendous amount about plants, and he's going to talk about the different species of plants that are in our lake and all of the surveys that they've done over the years. My part of the presentation is just to go over a few of the benefits of aquatic lake plants. Now, probably many of you, when you think about aquatic plants, you think about some of the problems that you're having with them around your docks and your swimming areas, and sometimes they can be a nuisance and you want to control them. But in reality, the aquatic plants in our lake are really important because they're really the foundation of a healthy and a very flourishing lake. And without those plants, we really would not have a lake. They're really essential. So we're going to quickly go through just 10 benefits. We're not going to really spend a lot of time covering them, but we'll just kind of hit some of the major benefits that these plants have in our lake. And the first one is that they're a major source of oxygen for both aquatic and animal life. And in the air, there's about 20% oxygen, but there's much less oxygen in the lake. So it's very critical that we have oxygen to support the fish and all the different life. If you don't have oxygen, then you really have a dead lake. So oxygen is really essential to the health of our lake. Aquatic plants also absorb nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and they filter pollutants from all the runoff from the sediment and whatnot. So another really important function of those plants. They remove carbon dioxide, and that's really an important source because you get too much carbon dioxide, that negatively affects the fish population. They have trouble breathing, and that can lead to fish kills. The other thing that's interesting about aquatic plants is that all of the carbon that they take out of the atmosphere is a tremendous amount. If you look at the ocean and all the bodies of water, they take out a tremendous amount of carbon and sequester it in the soil. So they're actually involved in mitigating climate change as well. And very important is aquatic plants will slow the flow of sediments into the lake. All of the procedures that are used to control the clarity of a lake and keep sediment from going into a lake really rely on slowing down the flow of the water into the lake. So those aquatic plants are really essential to kind of slow the water from getting into the lake and keeping the sediments on the edge of the lake. Algae control is another benefit. Aquatic plants absorb nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, and then when they absorb those nutrients, they're not available to the algae. So that is really important in the clarity and the cleanliness of the lake. So they're important in tying up a lot of the phosphorus and the nitrogen that gets into the lake. A sixth benefit is the roots of aquatic plants will stabilize shoreline and also bottom sediments, and will prevent erosion and also loss of some of your shoreline. Aquatic plants also provide habitat for fish and other lake organisms. And if you notice, everybody fishes along the shore. They don't fish out in the middle of the lake. And the reason, of course, is that the fish like those aquatic plants. That's where they live, that's where they feed. So those plants are absolutely essential for our aquatic life. And native aquatic plants definitely help establishing a nice, strong community of plants that will keep out invasive plants. So if you have a really healthy group of native plants, they're going to keep out the invasive species. So that's very important. And aquatic plants really add a lot of beauty to a lake. And this is a photo of a painting that Claude Monet did. And he did about 250 of these photos of paintings, and they're in museums around the world, and they're all worth millions of dollars. And they're all plants and lilies and different types of plants in lakes. And so the value, what's interesting to me is that, you know, we're so fortunate to live on a lake. We don't have to go to a museum to see the paintings. We actually live on a lake, so that's kind of exciting. And the last one, I'll bet most of you probably know the first 9 benefits that I talked about. It's probably not a big surprise, but I bet most people don't know this one, is that aquatic plants can remove pesticides from the lake. And as our lake, it's in an agricultural region, we do get runoff from farm fields, and so we do get pesticides that do come into our lake. And we actually have in our lake 2 native species that do remove pesticides. And one of them is American waterweed, and they've done studies with that plant, and it will remove both fungicides and also herbicides. So that's pretty interesting. And then duckweed. Probably many of you have seen duckweed along your shore. They're little green discs, and some people think they're kind of a nuisance, but they also can remove pesticides. So those 2 plants, both of which are native to our lake, are actually are going to help us remove some of the pesticides that we get into our lake. Well, to sum up, when you think about aquatic plants, they really are essential to our lake ecosystem and to make our lake really what it is. And when I was researching this topic, the quote that I read that I thought really kind of summarizes the importance of those plants is that aquatic plants are really like trees are to a forest. And that's a good way to kind of think about aquatic plants, is a lot like trees to a forest.
Okay, some of you probably recognize me. I've talked and been around for a little bit. I used to live on Crooked Lake, actually for a few years off Spear Road. I was actually Kim's neighbor, and Chuck and Sue's neighbor. So been around a long time. When I worked for the DNR as an intern, I stayed at the biological station there for 4 years. So very familiar with Crooked Lake. Kim and the rest of the board there had asked me to come, talk to you about aquatic vegetation. Again, the topics I'm going to talk about briefly, I could talk about for days, each one of them. So again, I'm going to give you a pretty quick go through. Again, if you ever have questions or want to talk to me more about it, our office is out of Columbia City. I'll give you my contact information. I'll talk to you, call you, email, whatever, can send you this stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. I might throw a lot of data at you, a lot of numbers. Just kind of get the sense that we do have a lot of information on this lake. It's one that we have done quite a few surveys on recently. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're going here. So as far as for what I'm going to talk about, again, go through kind of quickly, but the 3 things I'm going to talk about is aquatic vegetation. And again, Barry did a nice job of summarizing and hitting on some of the points that I was going to hit on, so that was really good to see. Again, talking about showing you the data, our vegetation surveys, which we call Tier 2 surveys. Again, we kind of identify the depth, the identification, and the abundance of the plants that are in the lake. And then we're also we make a lot of historical comparisons. How's it varying over the years, so forth. Going to talk just a little bit briefly about fish communities. Like you said, aquatic vegetation is really important to fish communities. And if you live on Crooked, I'm sure you are well aware that you have a fish that is very dependent on good, high water quality, the Cisco. So just going to quickly touch on that. And then at the bottom there, a little bit even with the Cisco, they were talking about the cold water habitat. Again, the aquatic vegetation, the phytoplankton, those sorts of things have a role in allowing that to occur in Crooked Lake. So aquatic vegetation. So as you should see as a handout, so I've got here, so this is our summary of our report that we did in 2019. Again, I have an interactive database that we can kind of go through here, maybe if I've got a little time at the end, but I feel like this will be a little bit easier and quicker to go through. Again, this just shows you a few of the things here that we found. We completed the survey August 13th, 2019. We found 15 species. We had 14 native species. We sampled down to a depth of about 19.5 feet. We found plants down to 19.5 feet. The overall coverage was 93%. So we did on this lake, we did 60 rake tosses. It's not high tech. It's a steel rake that's welded together on 2 of them back to back. We have a rope that has depths identified on them. We're based on the lake size and its classification. We do so many sites per depth. So we may do so many in the 0 to 5, so many in the 5 to 10, and so forth, down to 20. So in this lake in particular, we do 60 sites total around the lake. You can see those up there on the blue dot there at the right. Those represent each of the places that we did drop a rake down. And again, the overall coverage being 93%. So again, out of those 60, we found plants at 93% of those 60. Which again, you'll see here in a second, is a pretty high coverage for Crooked Lake. So here is a historical. So I know you had mentioned about seeing more plants, or some of you are seeing more plants. You could potentially be seeing some different plants, but according to our surveys that we're seeing, as you can see, you're pretty high on your coverage, on your plant coverage in that 0 to 20 feet, which is where we're sampling. So you can see again, the far right is the 2019, and then all the way back to the far left is there in 2009. From 2010 all the way to 19, we did it every year. Crooked was chosen as a lake where was a sentinel lake, so we did that survey. We did aquatic vegetation, we did fish surveys. We were on that lake a whole lot for 10 years straight, collecting a bunch of different information. Yep.
Did you do both basins or just the large basin?
Just the big lake. We do have a survey from Little Crooked, but I'm not sure what year that was from. But we have surveyed Little Crooked, just not every year for 10 years. Here is a list, and again, I think you should have a handout. Again, this is a list of the species that we have found at Crooked Lake. So it kind of gives you a sense of, again, there at the top, we've got coontail carrot, eelgrass, flat stem pondweed are your top ones that we see often. Again, the occurrence there is that how many rakes we've seen that particular plant at. So obviously, you can kind of go down there. Again, probably most of you are at least somewhat concerned about the invasives. Which in this lake is Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed. Again, Eurasians there at 157 sites. Curly leaf we found at 44 sites. So again, Eurasians sort of there towards the top, but again, not super overabundant. Again, some lakes you would have that be towards the top. In some lakes where it's really a problem. But again, that kind of gives you a good list again of what we've seen over the 10 years. It has a really diverse plant community. Again, a lot of area lakes, you're talking 8 to 10, maybe 12 species. Again, that's probably at least 20 to 25. So again, a very diverse plant community, which is good. Like Barry said, mentioning again, a good diverse community can withstand changes. It can help prevent other invasives. I'm sure you've heard this starry stonewort. That's kind of the new big invasive. It has not been detected in here yet. Again, the coverage of plants is good out here. It would have a hard time taking hold because it has all the native vegetation that's out there right now. I've had some questions, and again, I always try to push this book. So this is a guidebook that we use, and I can send this link to the association board or whatever. So this is a really good book that has that was actually produced. I believe that Paul Szczelinski works for Wisconsin DNR, but he's put this book together. This is the book that I take out in the field when we're doing identification on the plants and trying to figure out. There's really good photos. There's keys to it if you really want to get into it and figure out what it is. But it's a really good one. Crazy enough, you can only get that book from that website. So you can't find it on Amazon or anywhere else. He's got it locked into his university that he works for. So you have to get it from there. But again, it's a good resource to have if you have any questions about what plant you're looking at, what's off your pier, or what you're seeing. So this is just a quick slide. And again, this is showing the coverages and just kind of a way to show you over time. This is actually a coontail. So again, coontail is a very popular, it's a native species that we see often and we like to see. So you can kind of see, so this is the number of times that we've found it over the years. Now again, all those surveys are done the same way, same location, same depth ranges, so we can look at it across the board and see how it changes over time. So you can see coontail's been pretty stable. over the years. Again, a little bit of variation, but for the most part, pretty stable. Here's your Asian water milfoil. Okay, so again, this year, we didn't do a survey this year, but me being out on the lake, it looked like Eurasian was probably a little bit higher than what it's been historically, which has been about 14 or so, 12 to 14 sites on the most part. Just being out there, I bet you we're at maybe a little bit closer to that peak there, which is in 14. So again, not to be scary that, we're seeing more milfoil this year, we're doomed, it's going to keep going higher and higher. There is annual variation. And again, that was one reason Crooked was a good lake, because there was not a lot of aquatic vegetation treatment going on. You can see what weather or other factors are having on the plant communities. They obviously change. Again, dialing back in to see what the weather was like in the spring of 14, there's a lot of stuff you could dive into to maybe try to explain that increase in milfoil that year, and then why going back down to normal. But again, it's just something to keep in mind that even though you might have a year where one species is higher, again, a lot of times it's the invasives like that. Again, knowing that it can change yet go back to kind of a flat line is good to know. So here's curly-leaf pondweed. To be fair, the June survey over here. So if you guys are familiar, curly-leaf pondweed is the one that looks like a French fry. If you see it, you'll recognize it. So curly-leaf is a plant that comes on early in the spring, and then it dies back naturally once the water starts getting warm. So that's why here, the far left one, that survey was actually done in June, and most of the other ones were July, August, which is when we typically do our surveys. But that's why you're seeing, so we potentially do see a higher number of curly-leaf in the early spring, but again, it just dies back before we see it in August. And again, that happens everywhere. But again, for the most part, you can see pretty much a flat line study there on when we see it and where we've seen it. Okay, any questions on that? Again, I know that was a lot. Again, there's a presentation I was showing earlier. I've got a whole software program that kind of dives into that, and we can look at certain species and a lot of different things. Like I said, I could talk about it for probably 2 days worth of stuff. So we'll keep it as short as I can there. But any questions on plants? Yep.
Climate change, are you predicting any changes based on the environment in the future?
I mean, potentially, we're keeping an eye on just all factors. Again, it's hard for aquatic plants or fish communities or anything dependent on one certain thing. Now, again, eutrophication of our lakes is occurring, happening regardless. So we're starting to see cold water habitat. As you guys know, Cisco got moved to being put as endangered. With that came no more fishing for Cisco. Again, we're pretty positive that the fishing for Cisco was not the cause of their demise, right? It's the habitat, it's the cold water layer. Again, being active, trying to keep you guys. The Crooked Lake's a very active group. You guys have done a lot in the watershed to help maintain and keep the water quality what it is. But again, hopefully we're slowing it or maintaining what we have. But see, I mean, there's potential for sure. But again, it's hard to pin it on one thing, and it's also hard to predict how much it'll have an impact. Again, having these sorts of historical records is a key component to seeing what change we're seeing now. Again, documenting it is one thing. Hopefully, if something happens, we can try to step in and make changes or prolong it or along those lines. But yep.
Do we know what type of weed is over on the large basin between the two new houses on the south side? I mean, it's so thick you can hardly get through it, where it's real shallow. When you come through the channel from the small to the large basin on the left.
Oh,
Is it Cara?
I think it's carrot.
Is it Cara?
What is that?
It's typically in real shallow water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's typically Cara. So Cara is really is very popular around the edge, especially all the big flats that you have at Crooked. That's all covered by Cara. If you pull it up, it has a smell to it. Typically, it's crunchy. It's got like a little calcified. You'll feel it.
Is there
Yes.
a reason it's so prevalent and?
So it likes that type of substrate where it's at. It likes to grow in shallow water. I will say, so starry stonewort and Cara like the same habitat. And when I met with the board, I had talked to him that and Cara's technically an algae, which is another little side thing. But it can be controlled. It can be treated. If it's in real shallow water, it helps hold the sediment down. It's taking cover, because if you would remove that, there's potential you're opening up a spot that potentially something could come take its place. Could be starry, could be something else. So if it's not causing a major harm or major boating issues or anything like that, then, you know, I mean, again, small sections, if it's causing impairment, it's something we could look at. But as far as like wide-scale treatments of shallow water or anything like that, I'd be very, very hesitant to do anything with it. Nope, good question. And again, also I'll say, if you ever take a picture, my email I'll give to you, if you have a picture of vegetation off your pier or you get something, you know, you can always send me a picture and I can, you know, we'll give you an identify or ID it for you or tell you whatever we know about it as well. So, okay, fish communities, and I know you cannot read that. So what I provided you, and again, like I said, we did the surveys out there consistently from 2009 all the way to 2019. Every year we did a fish survey out there. 2 gill nets, 2 trap nets, and 30 minutes of electrofishing. There's also some historical stuff dating all the way back to 1969. We got 78, 87 there. So got a pretty wide range of historical fish data. Again, this is just talking about the numbers we've caught. Again, I have all the information on links and all that good stuff. Again, that's a topic for an entire meeting. But again, just kind of wanted to show you, again, what the data we have, what information we have out there. Kind of gives you a complete list of what species we've seen out there over the years. I did have one thing that the research biologist sent me that I thought was kind of interesting. So this is, the blue line is bluegills over 3 inches that we've caught, so the number that we've caught. And then the red line is largemouth bass over 8 inches we've caught. So a lot of times we hear that, you know, we'll say like, oh, fishing, we caught so many more bigger fish back in the day, right? Oh, in the good old days, okay? So what our surveys and data are showing us is that we're actually seeing bigger bluegill and bigger bass, again, from our surveys than we did back in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s. So we're seeing bigger fish now in our surveys than we did back then. Again, back then, largemouth bass regulations were different. Water cleanliness, septic. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have changed for a lot of lakes. And we see this elsewhere too. This isn't just a Crooked thing. We see this on other lakes as well. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Just kind of a cool information. And again, as we continue to do more surveys, again, to kind of see where those lines go. And again, with different changes. Yep.
I'm a little confused by what you just said, because you said that you were seeing bigger, but the top line blue, it looks like we're seeing, like, especially in 2018, it's really dropped below 2009. But it's
well, so
going back up.
yeah, so again, I'm looking back, if you go back in the 60s, my pointer won't show
Oh,
on
I
the,
see,
my
sure,
pointer
sure.
won't
Oh,
show
yeah,
on the
the
thing. So we're
dotted
down
line.
here back in the 60s, 70s. Now within here, again, because we were surveying it every year, and we know the amount of effort we're doing on those surveys,
Oh, I get it.
you're going to see a little bit of, again,
Sure.
the weather was bad one year, the water, so again, you're going to see a little bit. So, and again, this is, I believe, 5-year moving averages, so that kind of helps throw out that one survey where we just, you know, we got a whole bunch of bluegill that were, you know, spawning or whatever. So again, I always kind of look at generalities on this. But again, in general, we're seeing, you know, bigger fish than we had in the past. So, okay, like I mentioned, and again, most of you, I'm assuming you're aware, Cisco. Again, I would encourage you, if you want to know more about Cisco, we do have a Cisco webpage. We have a strategic plan talking about all the history of Cisco. It's got a list of all the lakes that are currently on there, the ones we're taking off the list. I actually was just out there at Knapp Lake. Basically, we're checking on these last few that were probably extirpated, that basically, or we're basically making them final decisions on that they're no longer considered Cisco lakes. So I was actually out there this last week, and we did not catch a Cisco, which was not surprising. But so yeah, again, I know I think we've even had presentations maybe on that, but again, there's a lot of information on that DNR website. And again, I will say our research biologist, Matthew Lynn, has done a lot of the Cisco work. So any questions of any kind, reach out to him or me, but we can get you that information. So I don't know if you guys saw this. So we were out there with a GoPro last year or the year before, trying to film the Cisco out in November. And so they're in the background. I've made a new mount that we're going to get a close-ups this year. I'm going to do it. But you can see them in the background if my video is going to play without being too grainy here. So this is right up by the boat ramp. Yep, they're right up by the boat ramp. They're cruising. My video's kind of cutting in and out a little bit there.
Amazing.
Let's see if I give it a second.
I didn't think they'd come up in the shallows like that.
Yeah,
That'd be very cool.
Yep, and so this is again, this was again November, November timeframe. So they're up and they spawn up in that area right next to the boat ramp. That's where they come into. We actually, some of you saw probably, we were out setting nets. My timing's off. I think it was last year or the year prior. But actually, USGS wanted to take some of our fish for a study they were doing on temperature, like basically trying to see if the crooked Cisco could survive and handle warmer water temperatures and some different things better than others. So we actually collected fish for them, and they came down and got some and set them up, and the results aren't back yet, but when I get those back, I'll definitely share those with you guys. So it's kind of just an interesting thing, but again, it was cool to see that many, the schools of the Cisco up kind of that close. Again, if you are aware, we've also had some die-offs in the recent years. Again, to the best of our knowledge and what we're seeing, we're still seeing them on the fish finder. We're still seeing large schools on the, so again, I think we're still okay. Again, don't want to see them dying, but still it's, I think the population is still doing pretty well at Crooked. Okay, this is a very busy chart. Okay, there's a lot going on, but what I kind of wanted to point, and it's going to be hard without my laser pointer working, so I may have to come up here and kind of talk to you about it. So again, we've got the dotted lines are temperature. Okay, so Cisco, we usually like to have, for cold water layer that they like to live in, we're looking at for 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we're looking for a DO of 3 parts per million. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. So the red line, the solid line, here is August 17th, then the black one is in October 6th, and the blue one is in October 19th. So I think the 6th was when we got notified about Cisco were dying. Okay, so you can kind of see. So again, let's just concentrate on the solid lines right now. So again, DO up here, we're at 8 something. It shoots all the way to 15, which again is unique. We don't see that very often, but we believe it's the phytoplankton and some other algae and cranking out oxygen in that layer. Okay, and then it kind of comes back down here, and you get this bubble. Okay, they were all good. Okay, they were good that time of year. We get here, the black line. So you can see we're here over 9 parts. We're going down. Now again, 3 parts is right here. So basically this is getting almost to 0 here. Now we are getting a little bit of a bump back here where it's popping back out to 2 something, okay? Which we do know, we see Cisco sitting below 3. So again, we actually are also seeing it seems that they will take a colder water temperature and a little less oxygen. Because we're like, based on our thing, we're like, oh, they should be sitting right here. And they're not, and I'll show you, which is kind of cool here. I'll flip back here. So this is on the Lawrence fish finder. Okay, if you're out there in the middle in that time of year, this time, getting close, that's all Cisco schooled up. Where are they at? 50 to 60 feet, roughly? Here's our date, 10-6. 10-6 black line. Look where that pocket's at. 50 to 60 feet. So it's just kind of cool that our fish finder is ground truthing basically that those fish are sitting right there in that pocket. My hypothesis, and again I don't know if this is why, I almost think that the ones that we see that die, I think that they get pinched off here. This gets to 0. I think we have a population that lives down here that gets basically stuck. They get pinned and they just kind of hunker down and wait for the lake to flip, for that to all come, mix. I don't know if, when we see them typically on the surface, a lot of them are still alive and they're trying to, they're doing that circle. Yeah. You seen them? Yeah. I don't know, again, my hypothesis is that's them probably coming up too fast and having a swim bladder issue. And so I don't know if they try to make the dart, they try to get through this gap. Again, this is all just my hypothesis and opinions, but that's where my guess is. They hang out here as long as they can. They try to make the bump up, and we see them on the surface because they come up too fast and they can't. And then again, they wait it out. But again, that's kind of a cool, kind of a neat where our meter shows they should be. And again, sitting right there. We've tried, we're still messing with sending a camera down. We want to see, we can't get a gauge of how many Cisco is that. We're trying to get a sense of what that means. Again, we think it's a lot, but then I drop an anchor down sometimes and we suspend it and it shows up pretty hard. Now, for that to be fish, they've got to be very tightly packed because otherwise it would show a lot lighter than that. But just an interesting one. And we've run into these where they're the whole screen. I mean, when the one year we had a real bad kill, 3 or 4 years ago, We were out there, and again, you had to find it, but once you found it, you'd find a whole line of them. Which again, they're hanging on, they're sitting there getting together. But so just kind of wanted to bring that, again, just kind of an interesting, cool thing. And then again, like I said, and Barry already mentioned it really, Crooked Lake has a very diverse aquatic plant and fish community. Diverse ecosystems are resilient to invasive and other changes. Again, they can help fend off if an invasive comes in. Usually biodiversity is a sign of a healthy, environment, healthy ecosystem. Okay, so they can help withstand some of those changes and any invasives that may, try to pop in on Crooked. Protecting and improving the current habitat are extremely important to maintain and keep Crooked where it is today. Like I said, it's a battle. Again, the watershed, Crooked Lake is one of the better ones with natural shorelines, with working the watersheds, with best management practices for your yards and everything like that. You guys are one of the better lakes that that are already actively doing these things. But again, there's always room for improvement. And then questions, and don't let me go over my time. If I'm already over it,
No,
you can
not at all. You're
move me
keep
on.
going, please.
So, what questions do we have? Yep.
I think one of the interesting things I learned from you the time we were out on the lake was that you said that our lake has more plant species in it than a lot of the other lakes.
For sure.
In quite a few more.
Yes.
Maybe you could kind of comment on.
Yeah,
on
so it's not uncommon for this list here, if I made this list for other lakes, to be 4 or 5.
Yeah.
3 that are really dominant. So again, to see that much diversity over the group. And I will say, some of these finer plants, like some of these long leaves and crowfoots and stuff, when you get as many plants as we do at Crooked, sometimes they unfortunately probably get just mixed in. When we pull up that rake, you've got just a wad of, so you're sorting it, you're going through and you're doing the best you can, and we do our best, but it's like, again, you could be out there all day too. So it's, again, you take a good amount of time to kind of pull out all the species, but it could happen where you're missing a fine, thin pondweed, that one time or at that one site. But yeah, you have a very diverse plant community compared to a lot of other lakes, for sure. Maybe it's got to be. I would say it's got to be probably. It's for sure top 5. I would say top 5, and it may be top 2. It may be top, but I won't commit to it without verifying it. Any other questions?
I got a quick one. You said something about they took the Cisco out of our lake to see if they could withstand different temperatures.
Yeah. Yep.
So why would they think that they?
So this is one of the further south populations that they're now. So Crooked's the only one we've got here, and then a lot of the other ones are up in like Steuben County,
Right.
kind of that area.
Could you repeat the question?
Yep. So she asked, why would we look at? Why would we be looking, or why was USGS looking at the Cisco? Why were they looking at Crooked Cisco in particular? And again, it was they don't know if there is. They may not, but they're wondering because this is one of the most southern populations that they know of, and that we could get enough fish for them to make it worth their while. Again, they're doing those testing. I think the testing's done. They actually kept them alive up there and like recirculating tanks forever up there. We were kind of blown away that they still had them because sometimes they're pretty fragile even when we get our hands on them. So we were running our nets every, I think, 20 minutes out there to make sure we could keep them as fresh as possible for them. But yeah, good question. Any other plans? I know someone else is going to talk to. I will be around. Again, I'm sure if you've got permit questions or whatever, as far as treatment goes and that stuff, again, whatever, if you have questions like that, I can try to talk through those. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Francie Hill. I'm a lawyer and a retired judge, and like you, I'm a homeowner on Crooked Lake. The packet of materials that you have in front of you with regard to legal issues include pages 1 through 8, our statutes and administrative rules. First thing I'd like you to look at is the statute that deals with our rights with regard to freshwater lakes. First of all, you have to understand that freshwater lakes are owned and controlled by the state of Indiana, and they're actualized through the Department of Natural Resources. Secondly, what are our rights with regard to these freshwater lakes? We have the right to, as citizens, to the preservation of the natural scenic beauty of our lakes, and we also have the right to the recreational use of the lakes for boating, swimming, and fishing. The next and probably the most important thing to talk about is aquatic vegetation control. The general rule is that a person may not chemically, mechanically, physically, biologically control aquatic vegetation without a permit from the DNR. What you may be more familiar with is the exception to that general rule that you have to have a permit. The exception is sometimes referred to the 625 exception, and it's dealt with on page 1 of the statutes and page 2, but you also can look at a diagram that's put out by the DNR that's in your packet, and it's at page 9. If you look at that diagram, although the print is pretty doggone small, you'll see at the top this language. Under state law, a landowner or tenant of land adjacent to public water can control aquatic vegetation along their own shoreline frontage themselves without a permit, provided these conditions are met. And each one of these conditions is required. 1, the aquatic vegetation control is done only by the landowner or the tenant. 2, maintain only 1 opening per shoreline frontage per year. 3, treatment area cannot exceed 25 feet in width parallel to the shoreline. 4, treatment cannot occur in water deeper than 6 feet. 5, the treatment must be 1 contiguous area and not exceed 625 square feet. And the last one, the treatment area must include and be adjacent to any existing opening to the aquatic vegetation. The rest of that document shows you different examples of how you can configure the 625. If you want to get an exception to this, to your already exception, and you need to get a permit to control your aquatic, then the discussion on how you get a permit is on page 2 of the statutes with regard to your application to the Department of Natural Resources. With regard to seawalls and underwater beaches, again, there are specific statutes and administrative rules. First of all, with regard to seawalls, that's addressed on page 5 of the statutes, and the general rule is you cannot excavate, place fill, modify structures, or build walls on the shoreline without a permit from the DNR. Now, seawalls are explained in detail in the watershed materials which are attached, or which you have, which are page 10 through 15. This includes information about different types of seawalls, conditions in which seawalls are limited or prohibited. It's important that you understand that there are benefits to a properly built seawall, and just because a permit is required doesn't mean that a permit won't be granted or that a seawall isn't advantageous. I think the other thing that you should understand is besides built seawalls, you can have some good effects with regard to water's edge just by not mowing all the way down to water's edge and letting 5 to 10 to 15 feet of area just grow up in plants, and that will serve as a buffer between incoming water and your land with regard to preventing erosion, runoff from your property, and other factors. Now, with regard to this issue of underwater beaches, that's also dealt with on page 5 in your statute sections, and the general rule, as is before, is you have to have a permit to put in an underwater beach, and beaches are not allowed in all places, the same way with seawalls. Pages 16 through 19 of your written materials are a DNR article on the underwater beaches, and page 19 reviews all the legal conditions for a permit. Okay, that's everything I've got. You've got the written materials and this basic statute. Thank you.
I'm Kim Walchman. I'm a board member and an avid gardener, but I am not a master gardener, and there are many master gardeners on the lake that can help you. I can too with natives. It's been kind of a passion of mine, so I would just kind of like to talk a little bit about what we can do on our property, or rather than in the water, to help our biodiversity. So we've heard a lot from Tyler about how it's important to have all these different aquatic plants in our lakes and how that's really helping us, and how Kara in the shallows is kind of keeping the stony starwort away. It's the same thing in your yard. So a lot of folks don't understand that all the creatures depend on one another and the plants that we have to have a nice balance. So this is a swallowtail butterfly caterpillar that is mowing down on my parsley. I don't eat that much parsley, nor does Tom, so he's or she is welcome to that. That's a Baltimore Oriole, and I put that in because even though it's jelly, Welch's, it's a beautiful red bud behind it. And those are volunteers in this area, and a native tree that can really help beautify your property. And if you kiss that one, it could turn into a prince. But so far, I got mine, so I don't have to worry about that. We all know that the osprey here is here because it is clear, because through the kindness of Dr. Meyer and his wife and others, the Dygerts, they built this wonderful platform, and we are able to see this on a closed circuit camera, and that takes a little bit of care and maintenance. And so we really like, that's kind of the symbol of our lake, and we'd like to keep that going as well. The 6 things about native plants that is in your handout that are important on your property are supporting the food chain, which we've kind of covered, the biodiversity, to support all life by having a balance, sustainability, healthy water, aesthetics, and science. So I'm just going to touch a little bit because I want to keep this under an hour so that we can have some questions and you don't take your Friday night. But a monoculture, which is our lawns, are one plant thing that we spend a lot of money and time on, is starting to become a little antiquated, quite frankly. We got our idea of gardening from the British. So you see the formal gardens and the privets that are perfectly trimmed. It's kind of becoming a little passé in the United States. And we were coming into our own and realizing that the things that we grow in our own yard are homegrown, and by golly, we're going to highlight those instead of trying to copy formal gardens from days gone by. So it's all part of the whole system, and these are all plants. These are actually all my photographs off our own property that kind of show all the diversity that we have here at Crooked Lake. We have barred owls, we have great horned owls, we have so many creatures that we can enjoy and appreciate, but they depend on local food sources. What are our local food sources? For the deer, for the frogs, for the butterflies, it's native plants. So that's what we're looking. That's my favorite little girl there. That's my mourning dove, and she's a tired mom. She's on her 6th brood as we speak, that I had to put in a bucket because my ciders came for the derecho on our garage, and we had to take her nest down, and there were 2 babies in there. So I put them in a plastic bucket on top of a ladder, and she went and got into that bucket. So I'm really happy they survived. So these are, thistles. A lot of people don't like the look of natives because they think it's messy. But we have a whole range of gardens on our lake. We've got everything from where I started, putting a milkweed in a pot and sticking it up by the garage and hoping for a monarch, and to where I've progressed in my gardening, to people that have completely all native properties. So somewhere in between there is something that's going to suit you. We know that all the seasons and the conditions on our lake all add to what we love so much here. So I'd just like to encourage you to, that's a blue-eyed Mary that a lot of you know are in Dygert Preserve. I got some plants from a native plant source that I've given you on the back of your resources, and my blue-eyed Mary is surviving on my hill. So that's my favorite, the button bush. And if you're a lazy gardener like me, I just decided to let my shoreline go and see what happens. So I would take out the loosestrife when it came, and mostly I have a whole lot of what's called swamp loosestrife. So it kind of loops in big fronds, but it really holds the soil. It's native, and that's the important thing that we've heard Tyler talk about and Barry talk about, is the deep rootedness of native plants. That's what holds your soil. That's what prevents runoff. Do I have hostas and things? Sure I do, but I'm trying to intersperse with natives so I get that retention. This is the Ang's property. They gave me permission to take a picture of that. They had cleared about 30 feet by their whole property, which is about 60, and did nothing but native plants in there themselves because their daughter works for the Nature Conservancy, so she had all the seeds and had the blow torches to clear it off. She had fun with that. So now it's 2 years, 3 years, that's the third year now. It's really gorgeous, and I just took that. So it's every 2 weeks the colors change. And then, of course, you know, our dogwoods we have. That's Tom's and my property. So you can see I've got hostas, but I do have a lot of natives in there too. It's just not quite the season to see them. But it's quite a challenge gardening on that hill, and I say it's keeping me young. 2 hip surgeries later, I say it's keeping me young. That's a rose swamp mallow that you may have seen on the preserve side. That came to my front yard on its own as a volunteer. So this is phlox. If you're concerned with, is it Dame's rocket, which is invasive, or phlox, just remember your hand has 5 fingers, most people's, and that's what you want to have in phlox, is 5 petals. Dame's rocket has 4. So if you look at your garden phlox and you count 4 petals, that's not the native kind. Trillium, we've all seen that in the preserve, where it's gorgeous in the spring, full of that. And that's, I think, close to my last slide. I know that's a zinnia and it's not native. And somebody told me it's like junk food for hummingbirds, but I'm telling you what, they do love it. We all like a Snickers once in a while, don't we? That's pokeweed. You know poke salad, Annie? Gator got your granny? That stuff grew in my yard too. I am not going to eat that because I guess you got to boil it like 6 times for it to not be toxic. So that's a little too much work for me. Milkweed is a really popular thing to attract monarchs with. That's gray-eyed coneflower that I can see up and down the road, and that's a sunset at our own Crooked Lake. So I'd like to wrap up and thank you again for coming, and for our great guest speaker, and for the guy that knows a lot more than I do about this stuff, Barry Nagel, Francie Gall, and let's give a big round for them.